The initial 53-man roster for the Houston Texans is out. What to make of the surprises from this roster cutdown to get to those 53 players that initially start the season? Of course, this will change. Before we get to the surprises, this is a pretty good roster and a pretty deep roster at a couple of different positions for the Texans. DeMeco Ryans has talked about depth on his defense, specifically the past couple of off seasons. It feels to me like he finally has it. I really like what they've done with the defensive line room, keeping 10 defensive linemen, 5 at tackle, 5 at defensive end. At defensive tackle, feels like they've got a couple of guys that can rotate through in certain situations if you want to run stuff, if you want to rush the passer. And then at defensive end, we know about the best duo in all of football, but Darrell Taylor, Derek Barnett, and Dylan Horton as depth pieces helping out in that defensive end rotation. I really like that defensive line room. Depth in the linebacking room as well. 3 guys that you could trust to mix and match and interchange as starters in Christian Harris, Henry To'oTo'o, and Azeez Al-Shire. And 3 players that have usefulness on special teams while they provide depth at linebacker in Speed Hansen and Hill as well. So a really good job to build that depth there, specifically in the front 7. Maybe could use a little bit more depth there in the secondary. That's something the Texans may need to address in the coming days, but a pretty deep roster defensively. On offense, they've got options on the offensive line. They've got depth at wide receiver, and it feels like everybody in the running back room has a role when it comes to the upcoming mix-in-list committee that the running back position will be for the Houston Texans. But what about the surprises on this roster? Hey, Nick Caley, you told us something when you got hired, and I don't know if I believe you.
I like tight ends.
That's right, just 2 tight ends on this roster, Dalton Schultz and Cade Stover. Now the Texans can fill in that extra big body position with a tight end maybe off of the practice squad, or maybe just they're going to out and out bring someone back to the roster after cutdowns, waivers, things like that, when they kind of see the lay of the land and who is available. But this is not an offense or a situation that's going to get by with just 2 tight ends. Schultz and Stover were clearly going to be the top 2 guys, and certainly after Brevin Jordan's injury, it was apparent who the top 2 guys were, but you're not going to go a full season with just 2 tight ends, and the promotion from the practice squad is a limited thing. You don't have unlimited on a certain player, so they'd have to mix and match which tight end they want. I feel like eventually we're going to see a tight end 3 on this roster, but the initial 2, that was a bit of a surprise. Thought perhaps that Irv Smith had a chance before his injury. He's on season-ending IR. Thought Harrison Bryant, who they traded John Mechie for, might have a shot. Even Luke Lachey, maybe he had a chance, but there should be some opportunities on the practice squad for Lachey, and maybe Bryant is back on the roster when the dust settles on player movement here this time of the NFL calendar. But just 2 tight ends for the guy that says he loves tight ends surprised me a little bit. Another surprise, hey, they did it again. And by they, I mean Jake Hansen, Jamal Hill, and British Brooks. And specifically Hill and Brooks, because Hansen now has climbed onto the roster for multiple years in a row. He was initially an undrafted free agent, has found his way on the roster for a few years now for the Houston Texans. But Jamal Hill and British Brooks both were fringe guys a year ago that you weren't sure were going to end up on the roster, and here they are a year later. Fringe guys, you're not sure if they're going to end up on the roster, but special teams prowess and earning the trust on special teams, combined with what they may give you in an emergency situation at their position. British Brooks as a backup power back to what Nick Chubb brings, and then Jamal Hill as a backup linebacker if you do need to go to that. It's a good job by both of those players to climb onto the roster. And now the real work begins on keeping their roster spot, making sure that each and every time they are on the field, they are utilized, they are getting special teams opportunities, they're maximizing those. The Texans clearly see something in Jamal Hill for him to have been sticking around as a late round pick initially in 2024 and being on the roster here in back-to-back seasons. And then British Brooks clawed his way onto the roster last year with a special teams and a new position forward approach. He was back at running back this year, but obviously the special teams prowess, he showcased that a ton. He's also been able to showcase a few nice moments at running back. He has fullback experience from last year. He practiced with the tight ends a little bit last year. British Brooks, he didn't really even have a position as much as he's just a utility player for this Houston Texans team right now. So good job by those guys. They did it again. Versatility does not save you anymore on this roster. I was pretty surprised to see Jakob Johnson and Miles Bryant get shown the door. Now, there'll be opportunities, I'm sure, for them to either stick on another roster or practice squad players. But Jakob Johnson, the fullback for the Texans, they're not going to keep a fullback unless British Brooks plays it a little bit. But Jakob Johnson didn't make this roster, not there for the Texans on this one. And I felt like with the focus that they're going to have on the run game, what they may need out of the run game, he could have provided something there. And then he was a big body that they could have had around to assist in some of those tight end duties. He could have acted as a pseudo tight end 3 while being the team's fullback. And ultimately, it seems like they didn't love what he brought to the table in the fullback duties, and they may go a different way with that final tight end spot on the roster if they do choose to add to it. So Jakob Johnson gets shown the door. And then Miles Bryant, with special teams usefulness, could play corner, could play safety, could back up Jalen Petrie. Pretty surprising to not see the versatile defensive back find his way onto the roster, especially when he had some moments early on in camp when Jalen Petrie was dinged up a little bit. Arthur Maulet was dinged up a little bit. He'd had some moments where he'd been out there in critical situations in training camp early on with some of the guys that you would consider starters. And I thought Miles Bryant, with the ability to play multiple positions, the versatility that we talked about, would make it. Versatility did not get Miles Bryant onto this roster, so no roster spot for him. And my other surprise, QB3, I don't know that I understand this. I don't get it. Maybe they were worried Graham Mertz wouldn't make it down to their practice squad if they got rid of him. And yes, DeMeco Ryans many years ago was the coach of an incredible defense when the 49ers quarterback situation went to hell in a handbasket in the middle of the NFC Championship game. So I understand having that break glass in case of emergency, but did you have that on the roster at the expense of third tight ends, depth at defensive back, something of that nature? I didn't love the Graham Mertz draft pick. He wasn't good in training camp until he had that incredible final preseason game. I don't understand it. I don't know why they used that roster spot on the third quarterback that I feel very strongly would have been available for them on the practice squad. But I do know DeMeco Ryans was the defensive-minded coach when the quarterback situation was not good in an NFC Championship game, and that probably kept him from coaching in the Super Bowl. So break glass in case of emergency, Graham Mertz in case of emergency. But I still will go down saying shouldn't have used a draft pick on him, should have drafted somebody else, given those guys an opportunity to make the roster. Because, hey, if a 6th-round pick can make it, Graham Mertz, why couldn't somebody at, I don't know, running back, offensive line, secondary, something of that nature, tight end, why couldn't one of those players have made it? But at this point, he's on the team, and they'll have to figure out what to do with a player that is for sure inactive on game day as long as he's on the roster. And knock on wood, CJ Stroud and Davis Mills are both healthy. What was your big surprise on the Texans roster? Let me know in the comment section down below on your way down there. Thumbs up the video. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Visit with Landry Locker on the Locker Room. I visit with him each and every weekday at 4 p.m. on the SNL channel, live at 4 p.m. So subscribe to that channel as well. And I appreciate you watching the video. I hope you enjoyed it. I can't wait till we talk Texans again soon.